We're here to discuss, but not to discuss. A better word would be to explore what is Bhakti Yoga. You know, it's always a difficult question to put into a small answer. But I'll just kind of paint a picture for you. It is said by many of the great saints that bhakti itself is inherent in the human DNA. It's our very, very, very unique and personal relationship with the divine that we're born with, and it never goes away, and it's there till we die, and then get reborn. But many of us are, I mean, when you look at the world, most people are not really conscious of that bhakti that lives within them, that connection to God or to Goddess. So I imagine that, you know, the Indian concept of time and evolution is so different from the Western concept of time and evolution. You know, it's like the opposite. In Western concepts, we are, you know, we started from the apes, and now we are at this great elevated being of this quality of humanity that we live in now, as we kill each other and fight for greed and everything, you know, all that. That's how evolved we are. In the Vedic concept, we started, you know, it was like hundreds of millions of years ago. We started as God men and God women. We were like half God, half human. And our lives were lived in complete connection to the divine. And in that connection, you know, we sang, we danced, we painted, everything we did was expressing that connection to spirit, and at the same time our connection to each other, to, you know, our fellow God men and God women. But these ancient seers, meaning people of wisdom, they were able to see into the future, and they saw, as the cycles of time continued, they saw that we would kind of leave our divine status and become more and more contracted beings. And they said, wow, we love you all so much, all of you in the future, which means us. You know, they're looking 100,000 years ahead. We love you, and we don't want you to lose your divine connection. So we're going to give you these practices. And these practices were the things that they were just doing naturally, singing God and Goddesses' names in celebration, in praise, and I'm sure at times in longing and awareness of the separation. So they gave us names and said, you know, sing these names. These names are divine keys. And they gave us all the practices of yoga, you know, from asana to pranayama to you name it. And they gave us these tools through which we could remember and nurture and nourish that inherent bhakti, that inherent divine connection, divine relationship. And these tools, we, you know, most of us know at least some of them: kirtan chanting, mantra chanting, dancing, all the arts, really, for sure, but also cooking and gardening and everything to express our interconnectivity with each other and with spirit. So Bhakti Yoga is slightly different than the word bhakti. Bhakti Yoga is the practices that allow us to stay tuned in to our divine connection, which is bhakti. Our divine, you know, it's like a thread, or sometimes we feel it as a thick rope to the divine. Sometimes it's a very thin thread, but it's always there connecting us to the divine. And so, you know, there have been many, many, many bhakti saints and poets from India, from the past centuries. And I also feel, when I look at the music and the dancing and the chanting of indigenous cultures from all around the world, you see this group chanting and group invocation. Musically, it takes so many different forms, but drumming and dancing and chanting, you see it in all the traditions that are still connected to the ancient ones. And so Bhakti and Bhakti Yoga is not specifically Indian, although in our case, the mantras that we sing and some of the melodies that we sing, or at least some of the instruments that we use, are from India. And that's just so beautiful and so cool and so great. But you don't have to have any connection to India to be a bhakta, to be a practitioner, someone who lives devotion. And I also want to add that devotion in Western society, Western culture, Judeo-Christian, I should say, devotion is a sort of a narrow emotional expression of submission, surrender, and thou art thou, and me, I'm just messed up old me. But in the Vedic tradition, devotion means the entire palette of emotions expressed to the divine, and expressed as divine connection, and expressed as longing for divine connection. There are so many stories from both the saints and even the scriptures, the stories of Ram and Sita and Radha and Krishna, filled with, particularly Radha and Krishna now, filled with anger, jealousy, possessiveness, neediness, all the stuff that Western society says we shouldn't bring into a relationship. But in the love between Radha and Krishna, the lotus is full bloom, and that lotus has many, many different colors and many, many different aromas, and of course many, many different melodies. So, I've been singing kirtan. I was just talking to somebody yesterday. I was getting interviewed, and I've been singing kirtan since I was a teenager, and I'm 69 now. And the guy asked me, well, was it immediate for you? Did you feel this joy immediately? And I said, well, actually, yes. The very first time I heard kirtan and started to sing kirtan, I felt a great joy. But it was gradual. It was a gradual process where singing kirtan, joy is just so awesome and so rare. But joy is only one emotion. And as the years passed and I would sing kirtan, sometimes I would experience so much pain and woundedness within me that I hadn't been aware of, but that would be turned into song. And other times, just out of the blue, I have experienced this. I'm singing like at a concert or something, and I'm singing, everything's going along nice, and then suddenly I feel these waves of anger, and I don't even know to whom they're directed, but I just throw that feeling into the song, and it all turns into fire, and the awareness. It's just so funny because the spiritual, what's that word? The spiritual okay, I can't remember the word. Like this, the accepted spiritual way of thinking is that, yes, we're all connected with God, so it's all pure awesomeness and joy. But the reality, at least for me, is that sometimes I feel that way, and most other times I don't feel that way. And embracing that feeling, I call it like the anxiety of separation, whether it's separation from your own soul, your own self, separation from your loved ones, that creates such a pain. And in Bhakti, we try to sit in that pain and sing and sing and sing and sing. So, yes, when I first heard kirtan, I was immediately hooked by the joy of it. But it was over the years where kirtan revealed to me the many, many, many moods and colors inside of my own being, and the ability to express those moods and colors. And, you know, whenever I sing, it's like the landscape keeps changing, the inner landscape keeps changing. I start singing in a good mood or a bad mood or whatever. I start singing, and then moment to moment to moment, my heart space, my emotion space, my mental space, it just changes and changes and changes. And I feel like as we're singing, we're in this incredible process of transformation. And usually I come out the other end feeling so happy. Not always, but often. So, you know, that's like such a minimal, I should say, introduction to what Bhakti is. I'll tell you about a man I met, a guru, a sadhu, I'll say, rather than a guru. This was in Vrindavan, India. My guru is Neem Karoli Baba, and he left his body in 1973, and I spent time with him, well, in several different places, but I met him in Vrindavan, India, which is a small village in North India, about 3.5 hours outside of New Delhi, that is sacred and revered as being the home of Radha and Krishna when they were young. So you know, there's a lot of industry now in India, and some of the pristineness of these villages is being lost. But in 1971, it was so pristine. There was no construction, no building. Cars were not allowed to enter the city, and as well as onions and garlic was not allowed in the city. I mean, it was such this pristine Vaishnava kind of heaven realm. Anyway, down the road from my guru was an ashram of a very, very, very elderly saint, and we called him Little Maharaj. Maharaj means great king, and it's actually kind of a common, you know, sometimes the chai wala, you say, oh, this chai is so great, Maharaj. But it's also used for very elevated beings, and this guy was so short. He was just very, very short, and his dreadlocks were longer than his body. And he had a bunch of disciples. They were young men. They were very strong. They lived a rough life. But he himself was very old and frail. They said he was 130. Don't know for sure. But anyway, he painted. They just had mud huts. The whole ashram was a bunch of mud huts. But he painted every single wall on the outside with paintings of the gods and the goddesses. And this was one of the aspects of his bhakti yoga, of his practice. And then I had the opportunity, well, what can I say? He had a little small room, not his own little sleeping room, but a small little temple room that was just his alone, where he worshipped baby Krishna, Gopala. And one time I was there, and you know, he usually closed the door, but there's one time the door was cracked open. I peeked in. I probably shouldn't have, but I peeked in, and I saw there was a little murti, a little statue of Krishna as a baby, and there was a little swing set that he was swinging, and he was reciting some scriptures. I don't know what it was, but long Sanskrit shlokas. And then he stopped swinging the little baby, and he took the little statue out and put it on a little kind of prayer, like a little rug, you know. And then he took these jacks and tops and spinning things, little kid toys. And while he was still reciting these mantras, he was playing with his beloved baby Gopala. And I thought, wow. You know, part of me was like, that's strange. And then part of me was, that is so incredibly beautiful, because to him this wasn't a statue. This was baby Krishna himself, and he was assuming the mood, shall we say, of being the father. So bhakti can be expressed in so many different ways, and I'm talking and talking, but one thing I want to really, really, really emphasize before we start singing again is that every person's divine connection is unique and it's different. The way you relate to God, the way, okay, this might sound weird, but the way God relates to you or goddess. And everybody's emotional world is different inside of ourselves. So traversing the journey that has no maps or road signs is unique for everyone. So everyone's practice of bhakti yoga is completely different. And there's similarities. I shouldn't say completely different, but each person's path, when you're walking the journey of bhakti, is really, really unique. If anybody tells you, well, this is how you're supposed to worship, this is how you're supposed to do bhakti, this is how you're supposed to sing, well, I can't say for you, but if anybody tells me that, I get out of there as fast as I can, because I know from experience that even with thousands of mistakes, that my journey from my heart to the divine heart can only be dictated by my own heart, not by anybody else's. And there are large religious groups who would tell me what I just said was completely wrong. So I'm only sharing with you my opinion and my thoughts and beliefs that have come from my journey. I met my guru, it was 1971. I had been so into singing kirtan before that, and I also had been studying classical Indian music with my musical guru, Ali Akbar Khan. So I was deep into it, and I went to India, and I had been initiated prior to going by this Swami, and he taught me this very, very, very complicated meditation practice. It was they called it a tantric meditation. Not tantric, anything to do with sex, but it was very, very much involved with effort and will. And I had to, visualize each of my chakras, and each of the chakras had a sound and a song and a color and a fruit. And, it was a lot of details to each of these chakras. And the meditation was to start from the root chakra and go to the Sahasranama chakra. And the guarantee was that if you do this 20 minutes a day, you'll be enlightened. So remember, I was 19, and all I cared about was I wanted to be enlightened. But in retrospect, my concept of what was enlightened, kind of like, I was this Jewish kid from New York, and to me, enlightenment looked like a surfer from Southern California. That's what I wanted to be. Anything that wasn't me, and was really cool, I considered enlightenment. Now, I'm being, flippant. It's not exactly accurate to say what I just said, but it was kind of like that, So I was dead on to do this meditation twice a day, and it was full of effort. It took so much concentration. Anyway, I got to India to see the guru of this Swami, and I found out, really, upon landing in India, a friend picked me up, and I was 19, and I found out that the guru that I was going to see was in jail for mass murder. So, this is true. I know it sounds like I'm making it up. A lot of stuff happened, but a week later, I found myself in Vrindavan with Neem Karoli Baba. And, I wasn't at that point, regarding gurus, I felt like I was been there and done that. So it wasn't like I met Maharaji and instantly fell in love with him. There were many, well, I guess it was a very evolutionary transformation. But one thing happened about a month or so into my trip. Maharaji often would tell people just to leave. He was famous for saying "Jiao," and "Jiao" is kind of like, it's very rough street talk. It's what you would tell to a dog who was begging for scraps. And he was known for having a bit of a foul mouth. He was just so cool, and he never gave lectures. He never gave discourses. But so he had jowed all the Westerners at one point, and I went to Benares to study music, classical Indian music. And my friends and I, had a little house in a little village outside of Benares, which was close to the Buddhist pilgrimage place called Sarnath, where Buddha had given his first discourse. So I'm going into Benares every day for lessons and coming back, and it's pretty chill and actually very, very beautiful. And one day, my old friend, the first guy, like when I was 11, turned me onto banjo, which changed my life. And then we went to college together. We both dropped out after the first semester, and I lost touch with him. Apparently, as it turned out, he had gone to India before me to study Indian music. He played this stringed instrument called sarangi. Anyway, he knocked on our door, and it was like a great reunion. And then he said, "Have you guys tried bong?" And I said, "I don't know what that is." And he said, "It's an edible form of marijuana that goes through this whole processing." And I was at that time completely drug-free. I was a musical yogi. That was my thing. I had gone through my drugs in my early teens. Now, of course, we're talking many years later, and I will say again, I am totally drug and alcohol free, but there was a lot of years in between that wasn't the case. Anyway, Nick says, I found, in Sarnath, in this Buddhist pilgrimage town, they have these stupas, which are man-made hills that have Buddhist relics within them. And the pilgrims walk around them doing japa with malas and repeating mantras, and they go around them and around them and around them, and it's really beautiful. But Nick said, I found a maintenance ladder to one of these stupas. So let's take bong, and then we'll climb up to the top of the stupa and watch the sunrise. It's like totally illegal in terms of what you're allowed to do there. But I said, sure. And the next morning he came at about 3 a.m. and he gave us these bong candies. I guess it's kind of like what some people have nowadays, edibles and stuff, I guess, but it was like an Indian candy. So we walked to Sarnath and we climbed up this little weird maintenance ladder to the top of the stupa and started meditating and waiting for the sun to come up. Now it turned out that this bong was way, way stronger than anything I had ever imagined it being. And I'm sitting there and I'm doing this meditation that I had learned. And I'm working so hard, like concentration can be effortless and concentration can be filled with effort, depending upon what you're concentrating on. If what you're concentrating on feeds you and nourishes you, it's easy. You just concentrate. It's not a thing. But if you're trying to focus on something that has no meaning or anything to you that somebody just told you to do, it takes a hell of a lot of effort. So I'm there. I'm starting to trip on this bong, and I'm sweating, drenched in sweat as the sun's coming up. I look around me. My buddies are just relaxed and having a good old time, and I was struggling. This chakra, that chakra, next chakra, and then out of the blue, I heard this explosion. like a sonic explosion. And I looked around and I realized that it was inside of my own head. And then I heard the loudest whisper you could imagine, also inside of me. And it was my guru, who I didn't then know to be my guru, whispering, Ram, 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 a sacred mantra, Ram, Ram, Ram. And as he whispered it, it had a little kind of a squeaky voice. As he whispered it, all my spiritual, and I say spiritual in quotes, all my spiritual understanding, goals, intentions, beliefs, kind of just washed out of me. And I was just left filled with this one word, Ram, 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 Ram. When I went back to see Maharaji at a given date that he had told us to come back, he said, if you say the name Ram, the impossible becomes possible. Nothing is impossible when you're repeating God's name. So this simple mantra has become really the anchor of my spiritual heart. And that was 50 years ago. And it's funny, I get bored of things, just like anybody. But I've never gotten bored with saying that simple word that seems to me to contain the universe. So, mantra and repetition of mantra with heart and with emotions is one of the main practices of Bhakti. Ram, 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 Ram. 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 Shri Ram, 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 Ram. 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 then we'll sing it really loudly. And either way, you have to open your mouth. Let the air and let the sound out and take deep breaths. Ram, 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 Ram. Ram, 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 Ram. Now let's do loud. Ram, 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 Ram. 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 Shri 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 Ram, 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 Ram. We can all sing those high notes. Shri Ram, 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 Ram. 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 Shri Ram.